is BCentrico in Conversation. Welcome to BCentrico in Conversation, a content series that highlights the movers and shakers at the intersection of sustainability, social impact, and creative storytelling. I'm your host, Caroline Asiala, and I'm here with Laura Asiala. She is the Chief Sustainability Officer at WholeWorks, and if her name sounds a little familiar, yes, she's my mom, my rock, my confidant, my most trusted advisor in all things sustainability and otherwise. Thank you so much for being here, Mom.
Oh, thank you, Caroline. It's such a pleasure to be here with you today.
Yeah. So let's get into it. Climate change, social inequity, pollution, water crisis. There's a lot to be worried about right now. And I think a lot of people are questioning, is it too late? Is it too late to make a change? Can we change fast enough? Can we change big enough? What's your response to that? Given your situation, your passions, your position right now in WholeWorks, I can't imagine that you agree with them.
Well, I guess I'll start with, we are still all alive. Therefore, it is not too late. And we need to get on with it. So we can't go back and change the beginning of the story, but we can start where we are and we can change the end. So every day when I get up, I think, what are we going to do today? What are the choices we are going to make today? What are the paths that we can set forward? How can we work with each other and listen to each other and understand the systems even better in which we work and live? And how can we, as a community, contribute to those?
Yeah, absolutely. So sustainability is somewhat of a buzzword. I think a lot of people have lots of different definitions of it. I think a lot of people use it incorrectly, completely. What is your definition of sustainability and how do you think about it in your work?
Well, you are right in terms of sustainability. Actually, when I was in college 40 years ago, we talked about financial sustainability as a system that you would have within your own company to generate sustainable profit so that you wouldn't flame out, right? That's not what we're talking about today. Today, we talk about sustainability around the systems in which we live and work. And those, fundamentally start with environmental. Those are environmental systems. Without those, we don't live, we don't work as a community, and we certainly don't do any business. Inside of that circle, of course, is then social systems, again, which we live and work in. And then finally, within that circle is our business. So we talk about triple bottom line, planet, profit, and people. And sometimes we look at that and say, those are the three pillars. I look at it more like a braid. You got to braid those three things together, because you can't say on day one, well, I'm just going to pay attention to profit and it doesn't matter what I do with people and planet today. Nor can you say, well, I'm just going to focus on the people element and to hell with what happens economically, because none of that is sustainable. I also like my friend Catherine Winkler, I think, was a person who either said it originally or said it first to me when she talked about, instead of the three P's, the three E's: economy, ecosystems, and equity. I really like that. I like that as another way of looking at the triple bottom line. But fundamentally, we moved from thinking about financial sustainability in business, in my opinion, in 1987, when the Brundtland Commission came together. And that is still the best definition for sustainability. It's rock solid. It says that sustainable development meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. If we just stick that, tattoo that on our foreheads, write it on the index card that I have, right here underneath the glass on my desk, we would all be doing very well to think about that. And so how do we do that?
Right. And when people say, oh, this is a sustainable product, or this is a sustainable business, or this is a really sustainable company, what does that mean?
Well, I think first and foremost, if you're not greenwashing, it means that you've thought about your place in the system and that you're not talking about exploiting or extracting something. And you're talking about optimizing a system. So if you say, well, it's a sustainable product, then I would think at the base level, it would mean that you have resources for that product that are considered within a sustainable format, which probably should be circular in nature and or if it's an agricultural product, have been grown sustainably. It also means that you have treated the humans and the animals associated with that in a way that is just and preserves human dignity and assures that where there is value creation, that it is shared appropriately. And every time I say that appropriate share of value, I know that I've got somebody in the background going, I thought she was a business person. That sounds really socialistic. But really what I'm talking about is, no, I'm very much a capitalist at heart, but how can we harness capital to ensure that it is inclusive? Because only with inclusive and just capitalism do you have sustainable capitalism. Tell you what, it's really, really hard to conduct a business during a coup. It's really, really hard to conduct business when a power grid is crashing, as it did this week in Texas.
Yeah.
Your businesses don't operate inside of systems that are not sustainable. You cannot have a sustainable business in an unsustainable society or an unsustainable ecological ecosystem. It's not possible.
Yeah. Absolutely. I remember asking a very dear friend and another mover and shaker in sustainability, Michelle Arevalo Carpenter, CEO of Impacto. And I asked her on the capitalism or capitalist versus socialist, where do you think you fall? Where do you identify yourself? And she said, I'm an optimist, which I thought was the absolute perfect answer to that.
Yes.
Because I think a lot of times when we try to put labels on it, what is the economic system that we want? Do we want to stick with capitalism? Do we want to go to socialism? A lot of the times when people are having that conversation, they're really kind of talking about the same things. They're talking about what you're saying. You say, I'm a capitalist at heart, and we need to preserve human dignity. We need to preserve the environment and these systems that keep our societies and businesses going.
Right.
And
right.
Those same solutions that fit into that, a socialist would probably agree with too. So I think I think that conversation is always kind of interesting to see how people think about that, and actually to see that people who are talking about this, either reimagining capitalism or reinventing capitalism or moving to a different economic system, a lot of times they're talking about the same things.
Right.
They're talking about the same solutions.
And it isn't something in which you ever arrive at. You are constantly reimagining capitalism. You are constantly reinventing business models.
Yeah.
It doesn't stop. We don't say, oh, good thing we've arrived here now. It's like, no, it's systems. It's always going to be something in those systemic, always moving towards equilibrium, never arriving at equilibrium. Rebecca Henderson's book, Reimagining Capitalism, is a perfect example of that. How do you take the things now that we have so much information available to us,
right.
For example, now we can include costs and include the value that different systems provide to us because we have that information, which we never were able to do before.
So I know you've already mentioned a couple of different people. You love to connect people. You love to uplift other people. But I want to talk about you for a little moment here, if you'll allow me. And I want to talk about your position now, what you're working on now, and how that fits into your view and perspective on sustainability.
Okay. So one of the things that we do at WholeWorks, probably the most important thing that we do at WholeWorks, is that we give people an opportunity to play and practice inside a system to drive insight that we hope will drive different behavior. In particular, what we do right now is leading the sustainability transformation, which is a 10-week, completely virtual sustainability leadership program. And it's a very interesting approach because it gives people who participate, professionals who participate in this program, an opportunity to learn new strategies, new insights, new frameworks with regards to especially business, sustainability, and it puts them on a team that gives them an opportunity to enter into our practice field and essentially play a game with 9 other team members over the course of 10 weeks to see how to transform a traditional multinational company's site into a sustainable site. And people have to make a lot of decisions in order to meet the 30 planet, profit, people goals that the CEO sets for them in terms of this simulation. And so we give people an opportunity to learn, and then we give them an opportunity to practice. And it's hard. It's hard work.
Yeah. So that's what I want to learn more about from you is what was behind the creation of this program. Why did you decide to do this? And it kind of comes to our topic, our sort of main theme that I wanted to talk to you about, which is what is the role of leadership in accelerating that change? I think I've heard you say before that we can't wait for the next generation to come along and save our butts. So what do we do?
So at the beginning of our conversation, you asked me, is it too late? And the answer is no, it's not too late, but nor can we rest on our laurels or anything else. So to the extent that you've been successful in the past or a professional has been successful in the past, you can rest assured that the environment is changing. The social environment is changing. The ecological environment is changing. We have to change to meet that. That does not give us the luxury to say, well, when the next generation gets done with their education and pick up the reins, we can't wait for 30 years for everybody who's currently in a position of leadership to retire or die before we change the way that we look at that. And nor can we afford, as individuals or as countries or economies or the world, for everybody to take a 2-year time out to go back to school. So we've developed this program as a way to accelerate the reskilling of professionals across businesses primarily, but also across the social sector, so civil societies, and also across the public sectors. In fact, inside our simulation, we have roles that are played by professionals within this fictional company so that they can try out different roles and they can try different strategies. And we have a public sector role, that's the mayor of the local community, and we have a role for civil society. So we're introducing the very natural tensions that people have when they are managing enterprise, because you have to manage enterprise inside a system. We think about corporate citizenship or corporate social responsibility or corporate responsibility, but I love corporate citizenship because citizenship means literally of the city, of the community. Businesses exist inside a city, inside a community, and communities exist inside our ecosystems. We can't pretend that businesses are like over here off to the side, and when they have enough time and when they have enough money, they'll pay attention to the city or the ecosystem in which they live. They live inside of it. They ignore it at their peril.
100%. I want to know what you think in your experience, especially with the certificate program, of people coming in and maybe being kind of new to sustainability. What are some of the biggest misconceptions that you notice when people are coming in? And I can kind of start because full disclosure, I've done this program. And I remember at the very beginning of the program, when we were having these conversations about these different goals, there was so much emphasis. People were really, really excited to meet those environmental and social goals that we totally ignored the economic goals for like the first 3-4 weeks of the simulation.
Right.
And I think that there's a misconception there that sustainability is benevolence, that it is
Correct.
charity, that it is
Correct.
the only reason that you want to be sustainable is to do the right thing, which of course that's at the heart, right? The heart of it is to do the right thing. Businesses also want to do the right thing. That's also, I think, a misconception. Business people want to have a positive impact too. A lot of the times people get into business or start businesses so that they can create jobs for their community. So
Exactly.
it's not like those things are completely divorced from each other, but we did sort of completely disregard the economic goals that we had for the first 3 weeks. We didn't meet all our goals in the end. But in your experience, do you see that when teams are starting off? Do you see maybe even the opposite? What are you seeing as some of the biggest misconceptions or myths about sustainability?
Well, I think one of the biggest myths about sustainability is that you need to approach each pillar discreetly on its own. That's probably the biggest problem. I really appreciate the fact that there are now people who recognize that you have to look at more than simply the financial bottom line. And so, gosh, I can't remember when the triple bottom line was introduced. I think it was in one of John Elkins' books for People, Planet, Profit, or the triple bottom line, to say you have to look at the economics, you have to look at the social, you have to look at ecological. And I don't want to quote the book because I didn't look it up before we started talking today. But that's been around now for, a good solid 20 years and probably 30. So that's very much involved in the way that we looked at sustainability now. But it's this notion that you have to trade off. That's the biggest fallacy. That's the biggest myth, that you have to say, is it environment or profit? Is it social impact or profit? And that's a false choice. I'm also a big fan of Richard Rohr's, who is actually not a business professional, nor an economist, nor a social worker, nor an ecological scientist. Richard Rohr is a Franciscan priest. And I really appreciate his work when he says, whenever you see two things pitted against each other like that, anywhere in life, you have to look for the third way, because that's a false choice. No more false choices. But I will say this, it doesn't mean when you're looking at a system that you can optimize one piece of the system and optimize the system. It means that you will sub-optimize the system if you optimize one point. So if you say, I am focused on maximizing profit, and I don't care about people, and I don't care about the ecosystems, because I'm in it here and I'm in it for me, for mine, for right now, you can screw up the system. That's true. But I really don't know of very many people who have that approach. In fact, most people who are in business talk a lot about wanting to leave a legacy for the next generation. It's how we leave a legacy for the next generation sometimes that I think we need to examine. So historically, the way people would have looked at this, I think about, John D. Rockefeller and the Rockefeller Foundation. That was a family that earned considerable wealth, right, by largely an extractive, exploitive business model, and then use their money to create this huge philanthropic foundation. that was a traditional way of doing it. But I think today, while philanthropy has its place, it will always have its place. There will always be people who will not be able to provide for themselves. And by the way, I don't know of any 2-year-old that I expect to earn their own living. So, there's always going to be a place for philanthropy, but it can't be in place of making an inclusive environment for all people to be able to work with dignity and to earn a living wage and to be able to create the kind of value that earns a living wage, right? So all of that is really important that we look inside that system. And I think that today is what we have the opportunity to do when we talk about reinventing capitalism. Most healthy, mentally and physically healthy adults do not want philanthropy. They want opportunity.
Yep.
How is it that as leaders we create those kinds of systems and those kinds of models so that people can earn a great living and take care of their families and contribute to their societies? That's all what I think most people really, really want to be able to do. And real leadership, in my opinion, is creating the systems and governing those systems that allow all people to flourish.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I want to know from you, we've talked about what needs to happen, that we need to accelerate this change. Your program helps do that, reskilling people who are already entrenched in systems that need to change and want to support that change. What are the biggest barriers to those people that come out of your program in generating that change?
Well, I think that in part it is developing a critical mass of people who are interested and willing and driving that change. And it's not just individuals that change business within their companies, but also individuals who step forward and lead things like a change in governance and a change in rules. And that is happening, right? And there are a lot of different factors that can drive that change. I'll give you an example of that. About 8 years ago, I had an opportunity to make an investment of some funds that I had from my retirement. I had to change out of one retirement system into another retirement system. And so I decided to do that in an IRA. And I went to my financial planner and I said to him, I really want to invest in some sustainable investments. I really want that to be part of my portfolio. And he looked at me like, what was I talking about? Like, what are you even talking about? I mean,
right.
I started to, and he said, well, do you mean that you don't want to have any investments in tobacco? And I was like, well, yes, but I'm actually talking about, I want to drive more towards investments in companies that have taken sustainability seriously. And I have a really, really great financial guy. And he was like, I don't know what you're talking about, and I have no products to offer you. He came to the house right before COVID broke out last year, and we sat down together and talked about it. And he had a whole array of products for me and said,
yeah.
Hey, I want you to know we've got this now. This is a fund that's more environmental, and we've got a fund now and that's more social, and this is one, and this has been really popular, and I have a lot of people who are looking at this because it's got these ESG factors, and hey, have you seen the Calvert funds? And all of a sudden now this is mainstream. That's remarkable. That's a remarkable shift. And when people start saying, I care what I spend my money on as a consumer, and I care what I invest my money in, now, the biggest shareholders in the world are actually the people who have retirement funds, right? I mean, they're a collective. And as soon as that group started moving towards, I want companies to invest in that are paying attention to ESG, environment, social, governance factors, all of a sudden boardrooms around the world started saying, hey, what are we doing with that ESG thing? And all of a sudden now people are more interested. It's created more of a demand of the kind of thing that we're talking about. So it's kind of a snowball, right? And or a flywheel. Actually, I like the flywheel better. Jim Collins wrote about the flywheel in Good to Great many years ago. Highly recommend that book. One of the best business books. And he said, you got to keep hitting that flywheel. You got to keep hitting it. You got to keep hitting it. You got to keep hitting it. And pretty soon you keep going in the same direction and that flywheel will get a momentum of its own. And then you can't put the brakes on and you still have to hit it, to keep it going. But I like to think about the flywheel effect that we've had on this. I also think that it has a lot to do with people looking around and understanding that they're living in systems and beginning to hold accountable leaders of those systems or driving changes for those systems. We had a really difficult presidential election here in the United States late last year, and there was a real difficult transition of power, probably one of the most difficult times our country has ever had. And there was a lot of questioning, despite a lot of evidence to the contrary, that there was an issue with the election and with the results. And you want to know one of the most impactful groups of people to come out and speak in favor of the smooth transition of power and stand up and say, this is the way this needs to happen, and we support this election and this election results. It was the National Association of Manufacturers. All of a sudden, that's one of the biggest trade associations in the United States, has a lot of multinational companies, and those leaders were standing up to say, time out. This needs to proceed. And as soon as you have people advocating for those ESG, environment, social, governance issues, that just adds to the flywheel.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really interesting. Holding people in power accountable isn't just about politicians.
Correct.
It's about leaders of corporations.
It's about mutual accountability, right? Yeah. It's about our government holding businesses accountable. It's about funders holding civil society accountable. It's about all of us holding our elected officials accountable.
Right.
And also not buying into a simplistic answer for a complex question. This is about systems. There are no silver bullets. There's not one thing we're going to do. There's going to be a collection of things we're going to do. And what we want to do is get that collection of things working together. Like I've said before, how do we get this to work in a braid? How do we optimize the whole system, which only can happen if you're looking at the whole system. You can't look at it one discrete thing at a time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So now we're going to get into a couple of questions that I'm going to be asking all of the people that I invite to have a conversation in this series. And the first one of those questions is, what gives you hope?
What gives me hope? I am always a very hopeful person. So it's a little bit hard to answer that question for me because I am just a naturally hopeful person. I'm a deeply spiritual person. I believe that our lives together on this planet is God's gift for us. I don't actually think that he shipped us out here to do everything on our own without beautiful systems that are designed to work together to have healthy and abundant and thriving life. So that's a starter for me. With regards to what gives me hope, new life always gives me hope. kindness, consideration, generosity, optimism. These things all give me hope. The response that people have in moving towards these new systems and being open to new innovation and new ways of thinking and new ways of doing things and being open to seeing people in new ways and in more inclusive, to hear more voices, more opinions, more creativity, all of those things ultimately give me hope.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think knowing you, of course, I've known you to be my whole life to be a very optimistic and hopeful person. And there's a lot of new life in our family now.
Exactly.
Which I could totally tell you were thinking about when you were saying that. I think we have lots of new life in our family and new members joining our family.
Exactly.
So I think that's something that gives me hope too, is more connections coming into our circles, more into our family, into our friends circles. So
well, and
totally agree.
I want to say something about that, because I think that it is something, Caroline, that you and I are really blessed with. And when you say what gives you hope, and I think ultimately what gives me hope is the love, honestly, that we have for each other and our family and our friends, and the love that we have for our community, and the examples that we have with your grandparents, especially. And, I just think about that there are no false choices. And I don't know if you end up wanting to have this part on the podcast, but I think about, your dad and I were married for almost 25 years when we were divorced. And when we were divorced at that point, the thing that your papa, your grandfather, said to me, whatever happens now, Laura, it doesn't matter. You will always be one of ours. And your grandparents always treated me as if I was just then their fifth kid. And that kind of expansive view and that kind of love that says, no, there is enough for all. And even when Daddy remarried and said, brought someone new to the family, there was no less love for me. There was always inclusive. And that kind of inclusion is a wonderful way to give people hope. It wasn't like there was a slot then that was already filled with somebody else. It was like, no, we just expanded that to make sure that there was enough for all. And there is enough for all.
Yeah, there really is. There really is. So the next question in this set is, a lot of people, when they're working in sustainability, working in social impact, working in diversity, equity, inclusion, all of these areas where you really are pushing and trying to form new systems or changing entrenched systems, it can get really hard. It can seem like there's no progress. It can seem like we're actually going backwards sometimes, which sometimes we do. And it can get really frustrating. People get burned out. How do you deal with that sense that things aren't changing fast enough, big enough, or maybe even at all? How do you keep going? How do you keep chipping away?
Well, I think there are two things that are really, really important in this. And the first one is that you need your friends. You got to find your peeps. That's one of the things that we're doing with the sustainability program at Leading the Sustainability Transformation at WholeWorks. We explicitly did not make that only a self-study course. Why? Because you can't learn about all this stuff only by yourselves. And one of the things that gives me a lot of pleasure, really, and satisfaction is when I see post-course, I've got people that have taken the course together and they reach out to each other on LinkedIn, or they reach out to each other on our circle, because we've started a circle of people so that we can support each other. But there are lots of places that you can go to get support. Green Biz, Sustainable Brands, Reuters Sustainable Business, Conscious Capitalism, Net Impact, tremendous communities of people who are committed to sustainability. And I'm sure I didn't even scratch the surface. I'm sure I missed someone, and I'll just apologize now if I didn't mention your group. But what I would say is you got to find your peeps, you got to find your friends, and you need to find the people who will kind of pick you up, dust you off, say, I think you did this right, this right, this right. You might want to look at this one. Or you might need somebody who taps you on the shoulders and says, what are you doing? I thought we were trying to do this. So you've got kind people who will hold you accountable and will be your friends, right? And, the second thing that I would say is do your part. Do your part. Be satisfied at the end of the day with a day's work well done. Your responsibility is to contribute the best that you possibly can. And then, frankly, sometimes you have to let it go to the universe or whatever else you want to call it to say it might not be in your time. It might not be in your purview that you get to the impact that you want. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't do your part. So just do your part. And look around and help other people and encourage other people. I would say those are the two things that I think are the most important. And then maybe the third thing that I would say is something I just heard. I've been listening to Untamed by Glennon Doyle, which is a very interesting book and not necessarily about sustainable business, but it has to do with how other people judge you. And in there, she said, what other people think of me is not my business. And I thought, well, that's a really good point. I'm going to keep that in mind. Or what my grandmother would have said, which is, well, consider the source. So when you're getting critiqued, consider the source. If it's someone that you admire, if it's someone that you've worked with, if it's someone that you think is very thoughtful, well, then pay attention. And if it's someone that you think they don't understand, then let them have their opinion of you. It is no business of yours.
Absolutely. Something I tell my team a lot is feedback is feedback. That's all it is.
It's a gift.
It's a gift, and not all gifts are exactly what you wanted. Not all gifts are exactly what you expected. Some gifts surprise you with their abundance and wonder, and that's a beautiful thing. But feedback is just that. It's
and sometimes
only
the
that.
gift doesn't fit.
Right. And sometimes, a lot of times when we'll get feedback, sometimes, the defense mechanism comes up and you go, wait, but that's not right. That's not me. And I think one of the ways that I've appreciated that my boss, Matt Carpenter, will say is, okay, but if this were true, even if we don't think it is, if this were true, what would we do about it?
That's a great way to look at it.
And that can be a really good, because even if we feel hurt by something or we feel like something was unfair or untrue, there's always a feeling behind it, right? And so when someone gives you negative feedback or constructive feedback that you don't necessarily agree with, one of the ways that you can think about it is like, okay, even though I don't agree with this, if it were true, what would I do about it? And sometimes you can get some good reflections out of that. And sometimes you think, well, if this were true, I would do this, and I don't want to do that. So last question in this 3, at BCentrico, we're always thinking about how to tell the story better in a more effective way. We have clients across the spectrum of purpose-driven organizations, meaning social enterprises, businesses with a purpose, B corporations, nonprofit organizations, but they all have in common that they're trying to push sustainability and some area of social impact or sustainability forward. How can we, in your perspective, how can we tell better stories that will convince more people, that will help create more critical mass?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think ultimately what you really have to do is you have to get behind the eyes of your audience first. And you have to meet them where they are and then help them see the arc of the story. One of the things that I think works really, there are two things that I think work really, really well in this respect for enterprises, right? So maybe not necessarily for individuals, but in terms of an enterprise story. And that is looking at Stuart Hart's Sustainable Value Framework. He first wrote about that in Capitalism at the Crossroads, which is the #1 book that I recommend to people who are looking to learn more with regards to sustainability and sustainable business. And basically what Stu did was he took a framework that's traditional in terms of shareholder value and said, how can we convert this so that people can see how to create value from a sustainable lens? And I think that takes a look at the business that you do today and where you want to go in the future and your internal capabilities and your external capabilities. And it comes up with these 4 quadrants. And I just refer to those as 4 windows. Where is your audience now? Can you tell the story for the window that they are already trying to see out? I think that really, really helps. I think the other thing is, again, to go back to the point that I made earlier, which is about being inclusive and comprehensive and systems wide and taking a look at things that way as opposed to individual discrete things that you're trying to optimize or individual silver bullets that you think are going to be the answer, or making false choices. Should we focus on the environment or should we focus on profit? The answer is no, you should focus on both. And that's where innovation happens, when you actually have to find the third way. But in terms of business professionals, there are really 4 things I always tell people all businesses need and all businesses have always needed. So again, you're meeting people where they are. First is your top line. How do you generate revenue? And how do you look at opportunities today to say, how does that create new opportunities for creating new products and new services? And how can you be even more innovative with regards to that, and looking through the lens of people, planet, and profit as you are creating new revenues. But even as important then is your bottom line, which is your profit, which means that you have to look at your costs and how do you reduce your costs. One of the things I was reminded of recently, we did at the Council of the Great Lakes Region a webinar on clean energy, and everybody gets really excited about clean energy, and that is absolutely phenomenal. And the most important thing before you take a look at clean energy is to reduce energy intensity. So it doesn't matter if we have a different form of energy if we're still wasting energy. Can sometimes be boring, but it's like one of the most important things that we can do, and it is a huge thing to reduce costs, like immediately. You don't have to convince anybody. You don't have to talk about reinventing capitalism. You don't have to explain the triple bottom line. You can go right to, hey, if we reduce energy intensity, we'll reduce costs. Increase your revenues, decrease your costs, and you have increased profit. Yippee-yay-hoo. And how can you do that? Taking a look at how that impacts both the planet and people that you're serving. The third thing that all businesses need are talent. All businesses need talent. And it is very clear that people are attracted to organizations that are more sustainable. So all companies need to think about attracting, retaining, engaging, developing talent. You can do that all with a sustainability lens. And the fourth thing that I wanted to say, and I'm going to emphasize it again, even though companies might not think of themselves as being in those ecosystems that I talked about, all companies understand that what they need to do is to reduce the risk of interruption, which actually means that you have to look at ecosystems and you have to look at social systems, because that's where your risk from disruption is going to come from. So you have to look at that. And how do you do that? Well, you get collaborative, you get inclusive, you start understanding different points of view so that you can ensure that you have the big environment that you need in your business to be profitable. That requires that you have advocates, that you have collaborators. So those 4 things, those, by the way, are not new. Those are things that people have been taught forever.
Right.
We're adding another layer to say now how to do that really sustainably means you have to be thinking about environmental ecosystems. You have to be thinking about social ecosystems, and you have to be thinking about financial ecosystems.
Absolutely. Well, we've come to the end of our conversation. Thank you so much for being here. Laura Asiala is the Chief Sustainability Officer at WholeWorks. Thanks again, Mom.
Thanks, sweetie. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for watching this episode of BCentrico in Conversation. If you're looking for more ways to tell your sustainability story, reach out. BCentrico is a managed marketing services company, and we help nonprofits and other purpose-driven companies to scale their impact. Our contact information is in the description below. I'd love to hear from you. And make sure you stay tuned for more conversations about sustainability and storytelling.